looking at Christmas, and Christmas is such a fantastic season in celebrating Jesus. And what I want us to think about today is there were basically three groups of people that basically heralded, welcomed Jesus' birth. And we can probably identify them. Raise your hand if you think of one right now. What would you identify as one group? Shepherds, good answer. Anyone else for another group? Wisemen. And then the third one I would propose to you is his family. Like, Mary, she was probably front and center with the whole experience, as well as Joseph, right, who was alongside as well. So we have these three groups of people. And I want us to think about them as they relate to our lives as well. So when you think about the Wiseman, you can refer to that in Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12. These are wise men who come from the east. And when you look at them historically, theological people say that they were basically probably from Persia, which we would know as modern day Iran. And they traveled a great distance to get to Jerusalem, led by a star. And wise men at this time, obviously they studied astronomy, because that's how they knew the star for the newborn king. But you got to think as well, they were revered and honored for their wisdom and philosophy. They were considered highly educated men. And so they travel for at least 2 weeks, probably a month, maybe a little bit more, because there's no bullet train and there's no roadways. They're doing either they're walking or they're on camels. And if you think about the distance from Iran, walking and making your way all the way through the Middle East and making your way all the way to Jerusalem, that's not just kind of a little hop, skip, and a jump, right? That's some long, and if you think about it as well, they were guided by the star. So it's possible they traveled at night. Because I don't know about you, I don't see a lot of stars in the daytime, right? I mean, how are they going to travel and make sure, maybe they traveled in the daytime and did course corrections at night? I don't know. But I just think it's really interesting to consider that these wise men went a long distance. They probably traveled at night. They were highly respected, revered for their wisdom. And I want to point this out to you as well. When they arrived in Jerusalem, who's the first dude they met with that we know of? Starts with H. Herod. Good answer. So Herod's a wicked dude. I mean, he is just flat out, you just want to puke when you hear what he did and who he was and his values or lack of values, how twisted, and he was sick. He was one sick puppy. But I think it's interesting that the wise men met with Herod. Of all the people they could have met with, and Herod was the one, he's the one that checked out with the Jewish leaders, where's this newborn king, prophecies, all that. And the wise men met with probably one of the most evil and wicked men at that time. But they weren't put off by his evilness or his wickedness. And I think sometimes if we're not careful, the wicked and the evil that we see around us, and we want to run away from it and be repelled and fight against it. But I think that sometimes we have to be aware that God can even work despite the wicked. You're like, I don't really want to hear that. That doesn't sit right with my soul. I can appreciate that. But nevertheless, Herod, who was ultimately sick and twisted, gave some direction to the wise men. And the wise men followed that direction. They didn't come back because Herod, was going to do his evil thing. But as we think about this group of people, I think there's an interesting thing to consider, that with all these wise men and all the things they went through, Jesus is a parallel. Because Jesus is our wise man. And I'd venture to say that there's not a few of us in the room and online that don't need a little wisdom in our lives. Jesus is our wise man. The earthly wise men followed a star, but Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus guides and directs us. And if you think about the Wiseman's journey to get to Jerusalem, to get to Bethlehem, they went a long distance. But I would propose to you that Jesus came a long distance to enter the human race.